Yay! So welcome to our live video chat titled, oh my gosh, I forgot the title, From Lived Experiences to Leaders. And today we have three amazing women from Ohio Guidestone with us: Donna Chapman, Danica Pingle, and Kira Sowers. Is that the way, right? And they're going to be talking with us today about leading in family resilience. As we know, with the pandemic, families are under a lot of strain, a lot of stress. And when we have families that have been under that for years, perhaps, this has just compounded that. So how do we, as leaders, lead individuals to be more resilient in their own families? So for our session today, we also believe that God developed leaders out of people who've had different lived experiences, right? And so when Jesus was on earth, he picked people that were sometimes in the margins at that time of that culture to become leaders. And so we also believe that we are called to do that we are to develop leaders with those that we are in ministry with and serving, that may be more in the margins or have had life experiences that have put them away from community at some point. So today I hope you are inspired.
Cincinnati was
I want you to hear and see. And I'm going to mute this person. Okay, very good. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I will just start out with just kind of giving you an idea of what Ohio Guidestone is. So the Ohio Guidestone's mission is to provide pathways for growth, achievement, and lifelong success. It is one of the largest behavioral health agencies in the state and has been helping individuals reset their paths, claim their autonomy, and restore their purpose for more than 155 years. They do it through community counseling, substance use disorder treatment, early childhood services, psychiatric care, and workforce development training, and more. But 155 years Ohio Guidestone has been serving Ohio communities and families and children. So what a legacy you ladies have behind you, and I know that you are continuing to develop and build on that legacy as well. So I just invite you to introduce yourselves. I actually met Donna through a connection through our Building Bridges community experience. We had a person who presented at that, and I said, hey, do you know anybody who's really good at leading or working in family resilience? And she said, got a person, Donna Chapman. And Donna and I had a phone call, and it became very apparent that we had this nice connection with leadership as well as interest in family resiliency. And so we decided to kind of pivot and really look at what does leadership look like in this space. So thank you, Donna. If I just invite you to to introduce yourself and then invite one of our other guests.
Are we ready? Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you. We're really honored to be here. My name is Donna Chapman, and I have two of my recovery coaches. If you're not familiar with what recovery coaches are, they are individuals who went through addiction, who was affected, who came to a place where addiction pretty much stole their life, and they just came to a place where they wanted to share that with others and help others in that addiction. And so right now we currently have 10 at Ohio Guidestone, and we are a substance abuse and mental health provider. We also are an MAT, which is medical assistant treatment for those who cannot come off the streets and need to have medical assistance. We are a provider for that, so that we can get them to come into groups, come into relationship, be able to stay away from places and people long enough to be able to start changing and reshaping their mind. A little bit about me: I grew up in Delaware, Ohio. The outside of the house was nice. We had the perfect family. And on the inside, it was a mess. It was a mess. And I saw a lot of things that took place in my family, but as a child was myself resistant to that. It was all I knew. I was a child. And as I grew older, some of that stuff started to come out in different ways in me. And of course, it led me to an addiction. And that addiction cost me pretty much my whole life. I had lost a daughter for a couple of years in that, my husband, jobs, and found myself completely alone and in a position where I walked into a church and found a group of wonderful people who had been through the same thing that literally just breathed life right back into me. And probably the best part was they let me be so raw. They let me be who I was, did not judge me, and they breathed life back into me. I see that as Jesus, just bringing me in that building that day, knowing that that was him that was going to restore me and breathe that life back into me and what he had planned for me to do. Since then, I worked with at-risk youth and incarcerated youth. Ended up working in the DYS. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the kids at the DYS are generally the most strongest in Circleville. They're the most at risk. So I worked with a lot of kids who had killed, who had raped, who had their criminal background was probably the worst of any of the centers in Ohio. And it was a huge experience for me. I call it my hardest year, but my best year. And that is where Christ showed me that they are beautiful people. They are no different than us. They have gifts. They have unbelievable hearts, and areas in their life, something went wrong. Something went wrong. And so it was there that I believed that God got me ready to be able to accept and see that all people can change. And I just continued to move forward and decided that all the kids from that juvenile facility said, go back to college. And I said, I'm 55 and I won't go back to college. And I found myself back in college in Circleville from the very kids that tried to convince me. I then turned it to addiction and started with OhioGuidestone, working alongside the courts, which is what I really wanted to do. And then I found that because I had such grace and such God had given me such a heart for people, and how important healing is, because without that I would never be who I am. And it wasn't just a matter of being in recovery. It wasn't just a matter of someone who made it. It was God allowed me to see who I really was outside of addiction and outside of all that past. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to grow other leaders. So while working with the courts and all the court clients who had lost their kids, I decided to become a supervisor for recovery coaches. Some of the questions that Reba had put on this paper is, how do you define leadership in the context of family resilience? For me, it is our expectations. Prior to that juvenile facility, those kids would have never meant anything to me. They got what they deserved. Leave them there. I mean, they chose it. And little would I have ever known that those kids' hearts were so broken. Those kids had been through, some of them never educated from the time they were born, why their moms were out in prostitution and they raised themselves, but they had a beautiful heart, and they, that they had so many gifts and talents about them that nobody brought out. So I started working with recovery coaches because I felt that they too had hit bottom, and they knew what it feels like. A lot of people give us the stigma that addiction is something that we want to do, that if if you wanted to do any better, you would come out. And a lot of people don't realize that addiction is one of the most painful, emotional, hurtful places to be. You are totally in a battle every day, every day. And we can tell that a lot of people, and you'll hear that from some stories today, who never made that. You know, we have cemeteries filled with people who never made that and died from overdose and addiction. And just the fact that I get to lead leaders who have been through that and who now get to share that with others is, for me, is everything that I think God had planned for me when I came out of my addiction. So what are some of the characteristics that I look for when I decide who I will develop as a leader? I look for, and I got to be honest with you, I'm pretty picky. I look for insight. I can recognize right away when someone is just going through the motions. That doesn't make them a wrong person, but it doesn't make a leader. A leader a leader has a calling over them. And this is not about just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. This is about having a heart for people. This is about understanding the emotions and the trauma and the mindset of people in addiction. And when they've been in addiction for so long, when they come out of that addiction and never grew emotionally, you're starting from the beginning. And you need to be prepared. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be a difficult journey. And so I look for that insight. I look to see that they recognize where their clients are mentally, and not allow any judgment, because judgment, there is no room for judgment. People are broken. They need help. We don't have time to judge. We are in a hurting world, and we need to get straight to the healing. And so I look for that. I look to see their passion and their drive for that. Another one of those questions were some of the developmental strategies that I use. I try to help them.
I hate to interrupt you because you're on a roll, but can we put a pause on you? Because I would love to hear the other ladies answer those two questions as well.
Okay.
So we all kind of go together.
Okay, very good. I as soon as I say this, that's where I was going to put them.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was going to do. So
What you were going to do? Okay.
That's where I was taking them.
Oh.
And this is where I'm going to let them show who they are. So I help them see people for who they are, what to expect, their goals, and each day is new. And I really let them see that each day is new. You know, we gotta get up. It's a heavy load. We're carrying people's weight. We're carrying their emotions. But because they've been there, this is their calling, and this is what they were put here to do. So I'm going to let Danica go first, and I'm going to let her share her story, and then how she takes her story and how she works that into the lives of the people that she's working with.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Reba, for having us here today. Okay, so I'll tell you just a little bit about me briefly. My name is Danica Pingle. I've been with OhioGuidestone for 2 years, January, and I've been a recovery coach for 3 years, certified for 3 years, and I have been in long-term recovery for 5 years. So it's just 5 years ago, a little more than 5 years ago was my day one, you know. And so today I work with OhioGuidestone. I'm a community-based worker. So I get linked with men and women who, you know, are struggling with addiction and mental health. And I get to take this journey with them. And the amazing part about it is I don't only get to work with them, I get to work with their whole family. You know, when I'm working with somebody, it's not just about them. It's about their children, you know, their husbands, their wives, their parents, whoever's involved in that, the healing process is for the whole family, not just the person that I work with. I am contracted with the Fairfield County Child Protective Services. I'm a recovery coach with them, so I get to work with parents who are getting open children's services cases due to abuse or neglect, due to their substance use. And so I get to work with those families for a year or more. I get to stick with these families, walk beside them, take this journey with them, and help them, see where they want to go, who they want to be, what they want for them and their own families. And I get to be a part of that today, which is amazing. So a little backstory about me, I got into addiction. I remember being younger and it was just fun, everybody, like, it was a cool thing to go and, party or whatever. And I started at 11, pretty young, no supervision. I had adults who weren't adults in my life. I'm a survivor of a ton of childhood trauma. And, with that all together, it was just a matter of time before, I got addicted. I come from a long line of addicts and criminals. So that's kind of how that happened. And, before you know it, I was addicted and couldn't stop, and didn't want to stop, honestly. I have my own child who is 12 now, who experienced every little bit of that. And, I've gotten to heal us, my family today, which is such a blessing. I started out with alcohol and weed, and then it became harder drugs and IV drug use, which led me to, homelessness, prostitution, jail, a lot, overdoses, toxic relationships, and just wanting to, die. But I'll tell you something, God had a bigger plan for me. God showed up in places that I never thought he would. And God put some people in my life right at the right time. And I got the help that I needed because people didn't give up on me. And I was in treatment for 9 months. And that's where I began to heal. That's where I saw the leaders in my life, who taught me the way. And I've been healing since then. And I just was led here to this position I never knew that I could be in. I never knew this is who I would be. I never knew that I was going to be able to heal or help other people. And yet here I am. And it's a direct result of the support system that I have, my higher power, my God in my life, and my passion. This has became my passion. So that's a little bit about me. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kira, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Danica. So this is my first time speaking today, so just to let you guys know, I'm a little bit nervous. I have been in this field for only about, I think it's been about 5 months now, so I'm fairly new, but I do have 5 years in recovery and sobriety today. Well, not today, but so I also work with CPS like Danica does. I'm contracted to work with them, and I work with parents and families to try to keep families together and try to keep kids in the home. So anyway, a little bit about my backstory. So to begin, my pain and hurtful life experiences began really early in life. I was born to a mother with a substance use disorder, and she did not know who my father was. So it was just me and her, and she took care of me the best she was able to until I was about 5 years old. And one day I woke up and she wasn't there. And a neighbor found me, and I got taken away from her and put into foster care. And for a couple of months, my grandparents didn't know I was in foster care. So I was in there for a few months until they finally found me. But I never saw my mom again after that. And let's see. Sorry, guys. But so anyway, I was placed into my grandparents' care, and it was a lot better for a while. They had lots of money, and they took me on lots of vacations and bought me lots of toys. And I had a sister, and I was happy. But I longed to see my mother. And one day my grandparents pulled me aside when I was 9 years old, and they told me that my mother had been killed. And I didn't really understand what that meant at the time. But over the course of the funeral and going back to school, and the kids telling me and my cousins telling me, I learned that my mother was a prostitute and an addict, and that she had been murdered by a John. And so, along with 2 other women who were also murdered, so it was technically a serial killer, and their bodies were discovered on the south side of Columbus, beaten to death. But all I could think was I wanted to see my mother again, because I had not seen her since I was 5 years old. And so I begged my grandparents to see my mother in the body. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional. But of course, they told me no, and I was mad at them forever. I was mad at them for the longest time because I wanted to see my mother, and I didn't understand why they wouldn't let me. Of course, when I became an adult, I understood why they couldn't let me see her, but it was still really hurtful for a long time. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. You're doing great. Thank you.
Anyway, I was angry at my mother too. I would call her mean names for the longest time and tell people that she didn't care about me and that I didn't care about her. But of course, that wasn't true at all. I was hurt and she had been sick. She was not careless. So after that, because I was about 9 when that happened, I began my descent into drug addiction and use, and I was obsessed with partying and thought it was just cool to smoke cigarettes and smoke marijuana and drink and all of that stuff. For a while, it was fun, but eventually it became not so fun when my grades started to slip and all that kind of stuff. And I met a boy along the way when I was about 15, and I stayed with him for a long time. When I was 17, I became pregnant. And I quit using all those drugs and alcohol, and I was excited at the prospect of being a mother for the first time, even though I was so young. And when I look at that now, I just, I was so naive and clueless. But so anyway, I quit using all the drugs and alcohol, but it wasn't meant to be. At 7 months pregnant, I went into unexpected preterm labor, and they couldn't stop it. And my baby was born, and he only lived for half an hour because his lungs weren't developed enough. And this was when my addiction really began to go like full force. This is when they gave me Percocets for the C-section. And so I began to be addicted to opiates and eventually heroin. And I really went downhill really quickly after that. Eventually I got into IV use and was living on the street and started, getting into prostitution and all of that kind of stuff. And after a few years of that, I finally decided that, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to end up like my mother. And I had 2 more kids during this time. And so I didn't want to leave them abandoned. And they were about 2 and 3 years old when I finally decided that enough was enough and I wanted to get clean and I didn't want to leave them behind. So very slowly, it was a very slow process. I started to climb uphill. I went into rehab, checked myself into rehab. And I had lost all of my family. I had lost my home, my car, my job, everything. I was like literally just so broken. And now I have been sober for 5 years. And I have most of that stuff back. I actually just had a meeting with my grandmother the other day about seeing my kids again. So hopefully, it's been 5 years since I've seen my kids, because they were really hurt by what I did. I stole from them and hurt them very badly after they had done so much for me and took me in when my mother had left me. And so it took them a long time to forgive me, but I just met with her the other day and she's willing to let me back into my kids' life and let me back into my family's life. So that was a really positive thing that just recently happened. And to back up a little bit, I met Donna when I was an at-risk youth myself in this it was a faith-based young adult group. And she saw me back then, and I was just a careless young kid and didn't really want to be there, but I was there to see some of my friends. But slowly she started to see me transform a little bit there. And then later in life, about last August, she called me and asked me if I wanted to do this job. So it's been really awesome to have Donna kind of see me along this journey and see how far I can come. And just in the 6 months that I've been helping people and been doing this job, my life has changed so dramatically. I mean, things just started to click into place, and it really confirms the belief that, it's on God's time, not our time. It really is. For a while in my recovery, I was really stagnant and didn't understand why things weren't happening. And it's because I was not taking that leadership role that I was meant to be from all this trauma. And I really think that that's my purpose now. And I tell Donna all the time, like when I'm talking to people, things just come out of my mouth that I don't even know where they came from. I can't even explain it. I never thought that I was a leader before. I always thought I was a follower. But ever since I came into this role, I've learned that I am a leader. And, I get to work. For a long time, I wanted to change all these events in my life. People ask you if you could change anything about your life, would you? And I would always say, yes, I would change my whole life. Well, now I want to. These things allow me to relate to these parents in my life. Like I have a mother who also lost a child, and I have a mother who lost a mother. And so it just, all these painful things that happened to me, I can relate to so many people because of it. And so now I'm thankful. I don't want to say thankful, but I'm happy that I can help these people in this way. And I'm grateful that I've had the life that I had, because now I can make a difference in the world. So sorry, that was a little bit chaotic and sporadic, but this is my first time speaking and it was a little bit emotional. So I apologize.
No, over Zoom, we do this kind of stuff to give praise, right? For being so vulnerable. And thank you both. Thank all three of you really for telling your stories. And somebody just said it was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And hopefully I've heard and in working with individuals who've been through the carceral system, the more you tell your story, the more healing it is for you as well. So I hope each one of you has experienced this today. Even Donna, right, who's been at it for a long time. It's as we claim our story, right, as we claim our story and pour into others. After we're done, I want you guys to go back and look at you ladies to look at the chat, because all kinds of things are coming in for encouragement for all of you. So I want to talk just a little bit and kind of build on what you all have laid the foundation for, is leadership, right? And seeing yourselves as leaders. And Donna's a little more seasoned at it, and she's a leader developing leaders. So for you less experienced women, but equally valuable in this work, whenever you're working with your families, how do you start to implant that notion that they are leaders of their family, right? That they have the same leadership. They may have had similar stories to yours, but through that, God is working. He has prepared them to lead in such a time as this. And it may be a baby step, but how do you, and maybe you don't use the word leader, but how do you start to build leadership in your families that you're working with? So I'll start with, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Danica? Okay, great. Yay.
Good job. Good job. We'll do the hands. I've never heard that before. You taught me something new. Thank you. I use empowerment, really, I kind of help them look at what their family dynamics looked like growing up, and what they got from that, and now what they want their families to look like today and moving forward for generations to come. And I use empowerment for them. I provide my own experiences. I provide them with tools, whatever that might be that their goal is, whatever they want to work towards, and really help them, choose the values and beliefs that they want to instill in their family, and help provide them with the support and resources to do that today. I hope that answered your question.
It does, right? Vision, right? Vision and is key. Vision and values are signs of leadership when you hold those, right? Well. So Kira, I would be curious to know kind of what you think, how you work with folks and help them identify themselves as leaders in the family.
So I don't really have a word for it, but basically when I first started to get sober and then first started to, really kind of see myself as a leader within my own family and eventually in this profession, I just started to notice the little things like that I was more patient and more compassionate and more grateful than I had been before. And so I really try to help women notice these things about themselves. Like I always ask my clients to say something positive about themselves, every time I see them, because for the longest time when somebody would ask me that question, I couldn't even give you one positive thing about myself. So I just think it's so important to notice these little things about yourself. And when you notice those things, you really start to notice your change and your growth. So patience is a huge one.
Yes, self-awareness, right? That's
Yeah.
the whole new buzzword is self-awareness. When you were listing all those qualities, it reminded me of the fruits of the spirit manifesting in you. So, Donna, I'd love to hear from you. As you work with families, as you work with other leaders, how do you help them to see themselves in that way?
That's probably why, I have so much, passion for this, because these recovery coaches don't show people that they can come away from addiction. They show them who they can really be, that it's not just getting clean and then you have to just survive, but you can take it and your whole identity, you will start to see your own identity and who you are and the gifts and talents that you have, and you can be way more than just somebody in recovery. I just want to give you this one example. I took them into the courtroom to sit with judges, and the judges wanted to hear from the recovery coaches. And Franklin County is very well known for their specialty docket for recovery, people in recovery trying to get their kids back and criminal. But they heard the hearts of these recovery coaches, and they said, for the first time, someone with an addictive heart, that heart was brought in here and put on that table, and I see them differently. And it was just so overwhelming. It was so overwhelming. So that is why I have so much passion, and I'm just so compassionate over these recovery coaches. They are going to change. They are the missing link that we have needed for a long time. A long time.
That is awesome. For people who are leading their families, particularly in this time with COVID and that kind of thing, and who want to develop more resiliency just within their own families, what is some advice you would give them?
Well, for us, I think because a lot of them deal with a lot of cognitive issues, and a lot of them deal with still coming out of their recovery. I think we role model it. I think that we let it trust us, and we let them see that they can be who they are with us, and it just starts to come naturally, and it helps them to grow into who they are, just to grow into that. Instead of just the advice, it's more like they start to watch it and see it and feel it. And when you start to make those connections, something happens. It's a beautiful thing.
It creates that vision of, oh, I want to be like that.
Absolutely. And the more, that they learn, most of them don't have any social, emotional. So they don't get out with others. They don't even want to go to meetings. And for them to be able to come into a place, where they start to have social interaction and the emotions are starting to get healed and they're hearing other stories. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's the change they need.
Are all three of you working online primarily? Is most of your work right now online, or is it in person?
Go ahead, Danica.
So I guess you could consider me a hybrid schedule.
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of telehealth, but I do have families who have needs, um, and that we think it's very more therapeutic to meet in person when needed. So I do some in-person work right now, which is a blessing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So how do you what are some of the adjustments you've had to had to make as you've moved online? Or what are some of the things? Are there some other approaches that you're using in your leadership of of, of families online versus in person?
I can speak on that, Donna, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Um, yes, there have been huge adjustments. And we've been into this for almost a year now. So in the beginning, you know, last March, when everything was just all automatically online, telehealth, no in person, and we were all so unsure, right? So, I would do things. I would like print off packets and worksheets and different things and deliver it to them, maybe
Okay.
drop off care packages to them. I would drop off paint supplies and we would do guided paints over video chat together. If people stopped engaging with me and wouldn't answer me, I would drop off thinking of you cards to their door. You know, I literally would try to do, I mean, we would do meetings and speaker tapes and different things over video chat together. Anything to, I'd even play little games with them like Pictionary, honestly, to let them know that they're not alone. And that it was going to be okay. I would stay up to date as much as possible on everything going on in the world, to be able to, talk to them when they had questions or when I would ask them, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about what's going on right now? And, and I could educate them as much as I possibly could about what's really going on in the world. And I really would help them, not feel alone. And that to see a future ahead of us, to keep the hope and the faith alive. And but because a lot has been pretty scary for a lot of people, and it's been pretty successful. I have to admit that there were a lot of challenges. There's been a lot of people who have really struggled, and there are some who've made it, who've been really successful through this time. So I'm very thankful for that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. It did. Anybody, Donna or Kira, have you had any strategies you've used to keep people engaged and to even build that trust, right? Because part of leading is building that trust. And Kira, you said you've been at it for 5 months, so you hit right in the middle of the pandemic. You started this in the middle of the pandemic, so how do you build trust as a new person, perhaps even?
Well, so I actually still go to see my clients in the home because I'm working with CPS and we just in my county, because I work in a different county than Danica, we actually do go to the home still. But it has been actually difficult to insert myself into these families that already had these open cases because they had somebody filling in for my position before I was there. So they, learned to trust these two women that were already there. And to insert myself, I mean, I've literally had people tell me, I don't want you here, go away. And I'm sure that happens anyway, but it's been especially difficult starting out. But I do things like I bring food boxes to them from the food pantry out here where I live. And just like Danica said, I'll not a thank you card, but I'll text them all the time like, hey, I'm thinking of you, and just try to, slowly grind my way in there. And it's actually worked pretty well. Most of the families are working with me now full time. There's only a couple that are still resistant to it.
That's awesome. That's really great. Good for you for being persistent, right? Persistent and consistent. Donna, you kind of sit in a little different chair than these ladies a little bit. So what have you seen kind of overall, what's working well for continuing to connect with families and continue to lead them?
We do hold our groups over Zoom. Our groups, we have IOP groups, and I actually do a parent group. It's very deep, and we just help them to see, because they they just don't realize the effect that this has had on their kids being taken out of the home. And they don't have the connections that, well, my kid was too young, they'll never remember, when really the developmental stages were neglected. And so those kids are going to, they are going to have some struggles. And so we help them make those connections. And I've had men cry at the end of that group because they are so moved when those connections, and to keep myself on the same level as them, and then talk about those emotions and let them become vulnerable and talk about those emotions is fascinating. The more they're able to bring up and out of them, the more healing that they're going to receive. And so those groups online, and then of course, a lot of the other coaches will do vision boards, or they'll paint together online. They'll paint coffee cups and talk about the brokenness on the inside and paint the outside. And they've come up with a lot of creative things that they do with them. So, and a lot more of the coaches are starting to see the people again in face to face.
That's great. Okay, I don't have any more questions. We didn't actually even follow the script I sent you all because you were so powerful and led us down some amazing paths. So I would like to open it up to our participants to ask you three any questions they may have, whether they're sitting in the space of working with families right now, or just leadership in general, leading people who are on this recovery healing journey. Anything like that. So if you want to bring up your video again, that's perfectly fine. And you can raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask questions, or you can use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to ask our guests any questions that you may have. So we'll just let people kind of collect their thoughts for a minute. And
can I add something while they do that?
Sure.
Last night as I prepared, I thought about just healing, and I thought about, of all people in the Bible, Job, please, Lord, don't ever do Job. I don't want to do a Job, anybody but Job. But I think about that, and I think to myself, what an example. Let's face it, Job was, he was upset. He was definitely had anger. But the biggest thing was the people that came around him, his friends, did not provide the kind of nurturing that he needed. And that was the biggest problem for Job that he was coming up against, was the nurturing from his friends, from the people who were brought around him to care for him, was not there. And so what a huge difference, and I definitely use that with my coaches, because it's vital on how these people are treated. They've been through some very intense past.
Yeah. Pastor Ruth Carter Christ, you're on video. Do you have a question?
I do. I'm so impressed with the power that is given to the people as you're telling them, and they are realizing and identifying themselves as leaders. And to me, I came from a background of using work with people with disabilities to empower them and to make them be taxpayers instead of leaning into the systems for their own survival. And I just am so aware of how important work is in our lives. So what percentage of the people that come into your program are able to take advantage of that kind of leadership, or revisioning themselves as somebody that's contributing instead of somebody that's just needing some assistance? I guess this is to you mostly, Donna, but anybody.
Thank you for that. I can't really say a percentage, but what I can say, because again, I work alongside the courts, and the courts in Franklin County are probably the main recovery center. There's not a county like Franklin County who has the most successful specialty docket courts. So I do get to see all the families who get their kids back and the steps that they have to take. Do we have some that struggle and fall off? Yes, we do. They're just not ready. Do we have graduation every 3 months where we see 5 little faces back on the screen with their mom, because they've been brought back because she was able to be compliant. And then she started to find out who she was outside of addiction. She started to realize her purpose is, I am a mother, and her relationship with those children are changing. Yes, we see that all the time, and it is absolutely phenomenal.
Very neat.
I-
A beautiful program. Go ahead,
I would
Danica.
love
Sorry.
to speak on that if you don't mind.
Sure, please do.
I would like to say that the majority of the families that I get to work with reclaim their lives, become contributing members in society. The majority, I've even seen people get off of disability and become employed. As a matter of fact, I just have to share this because it warmed my heart. I had a mom who is struggling with leaving an abusive relationship and has this opportunity to go into sober living today, and was fearing that it would ruin her marriage, even though like it's a whole long story. And she messaged me and she was like, I'm trying to chicken out. Like, can you please tell me something? And I'm like, this is shaking your faith. Like, don't let this, you have to have blind faith. Like, it's going to be okay. I know it's going to be okay. And she said, as soon as I read that, I got a call for a job interview. And I'm like, congratulations, just being able to share that with her, and showing her exactly who she is and where she's at and where she's going, and then seeing the magic happen behind it's beautiful. And that's really what it's about. I just get to be an instrument to them. The rest is happening as they do the footwork to get it. And it's a beautiful thing. So.
I would like to say something too. I think the work that like Ohio Guidestone and other entities like that are doing to hire recovery coaches, people like me, is also helping people become, tax off the streets into taxpayers. Like she said, that was a good way to say it. Because like, for example, this month I'm switching off Medicaid to real insurance, and
that's good.
And before this, I worked in fast food and I had a felony, and I couldn't even get a job at a gas station over a restaurant. So just Ohio Guidestone and people like Donna giving people like me chances turns me into the person that I am able to be today, and hopefully an even awesomer person 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now. So
this is a blessing. I think we get so overwhelmed with the negativity of everything, and to hear these success stories of your lives, and to see your excitement, and to hear your ownership of your accomplishments. You are new creations, and you're praising God as you're walking forward, but you're also knowing that you had to be humbled first. And that's hard for everybody. So I just sounds like a great program. And I've had family members struggling with this same issue, so I tune in and listen carefully, because they're in different stages of their recovery and wanting to move forward. So I might have to move them all to Franklin County. I don't know. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
And thank you for the work that the church does. The church is, I have a lot of people that wouldn't make it without the supports in the community that the church brings for us, the churches bring for us. So for me, myself too. So thank you. Now, it doesn't take one person, it's a village. It takes everybody. It takes the support from a whole community and then some. So thank you for everything that you do.
But that brings up a question, but go ahead. But then well, you mentioned churches and how churches can come alongside these families. Just plain out, what kind of a culture and environment does the church have to present for that family to feel like they can even enter into that kind of relationship? Does that make sense? Whenever are there some markers as you've worked with families, and like you said, that if it wasn't for the church, so many of your families. So what was it in those churches, other than just being welcoming, quote unquote welcoming, because we tend to use that word a lot in church world, and we welcome everybody. there are certain things that perhaps people who've walked in your path look for. Is this church really going to be welcoming to us? Are they really going to help me find my purpose, see who I am as a child of God? Does that make sense? I just want you to be real with us, with our faith leaders.
Sure. Donna, do you want me to, or do you want to?
I was just going to say, I think there's sometimes still a stigma. I know when I was young, I felt like I was being judged and so a lot of us carry that with us for a long time, and don't realize that the church are people, and a lot of them are broken, just as broken as we are, and because I didn't know Jesus and that he actually was the one in that church, I tended to have that stigma. But of course, now I think that has been changed. I think that it's not like that. We have a lot of churches now that come in and bring food for the catch court, human trafficking court. Actually, it's the United Methodist Church does that. A lot more of the churches are starting to go into the prisons and starting to go in and work with people in addiction and come along and mentor. And most of our mentors that we're hiring are, from a church. So I think that is starting to change. And that's where people are starting to find Christ and find that fellowship that they need in addition to the healing of a provider.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of something the same thing. It's the community work, honestly. It's the raw and realness of the pastor's sermon and of the congregation, knowing that, we're not perfect in here. We all have some type of struggle. And it's okay. We love you anyways. We want you here anyways. Like, we're going to do this together. And I really what changed me is when I was hurting the most, that people from some church somewhere was there for me, for us, for the treatment centers, in jail, on the streets. They were there for me. And that's what, brought me closer. I know we only have like a minute left, and real quick before we do, I just wanted to share this with you. This book is written by Dr. Ben. Donna, what exactly is Dr. Ben's position with us? I don't want to chop it.
Everything.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Mr. Everything.
So it's called Building Together: How Relationships Make Families and Communities More Resilient. Dr. Benjamin Kearney, it starts with a K, Kearney, wrote this book, and it talks about the resiliency that we can create in the communities and in our own lives, and kind of how that works, and about OhioGuidestone. And it's about $15 on Amazon if you ever wanted to look into it. It's an amazing book. So I wanted you guys to know about it so that you could read that if you wanted it. It really explains a lot about resiliency and leadership.
He's great. He's a great preacher too. Very great.
Can you put that in the chat, and then I'll capture that?
That's what I was going to ask.
Does anybody else have any questions for our amazing guests? Somebody wrote in the chat, I love that they all say, I get to work with these families. It's a privilege for you all to work with these families, and a blessing, right? It is
such a blessing.
How have you, give one example, just as we close out, one example of one person who has fueled your leadership. And it could be a person that you're working with, and they just said something that you're like, ooh, that is a truth right there that I got to hold on to in my life and in my work. So just one person or one statement, perhaps, that is kind of your guiding light, guide for you.
I prepared for this. I thought about who are the role models, who are the leaders in my life that impact me, who I draw that inspiration from. And I have three. One is my counselor. One is my my sponsor, my Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor. And then my other one is my supervisor, Donna Chapman. And the one thing I can tell you about all three of these such strong women is that they have this ability that I can't even understand or have yet, that they can just speak truth and light and life into you, motivation and empowerment about like way beyond what I have yet, that makes me want more, that makes me want to live. And that is what I love about them. And they're just astonishing women. So those are the ones for me.
That's awesome.
Try not to be too jealous of my job.
Kira, how about you?
I would say, so one person is my sister. My whole entire life, she's been like the leader. She's always taken care of me and been there for me. And she's this person that is always like looking at the glass half full and just has eternal optimism and just super supportive. And she's just always been an awesome, strong woman. And I look up to that. And then the other person, and this is honest to God truth, is Donna. And she has been ever since I was a teenager. It was always awesome to be in Donna's groups because like Danica said, she really just speaks the truth and you can just hear it pouring from her voice and from her heart. And I've always loved it. And so does everybody else around her. Donna knows she's everybody's favorite. She always has been. So, and I'm so thankful that I get the chance for her to be my supervisor now. It's just so awesome because I thought that, I would get to have Donna as a teenager and that was it. But now I get to have her again. And I'm just so glad and thankful.
That's awesome. Thank you. How about you, Donna, as a leader of leaders and as a leader of women?
I do have some that have made a real impact on me just by through their character. But I have to say that I have had so much healing from Christ, so much healing, and he has showed me the heart and the brokenness that and just the value of all people, the small things that he has done for me. And that nobody, there's nobody that he looks over at and I like them better or they're better, they have more talent. He sees us all the same and he wants that healing for all of us. And that motivates me because I wouldn't have that without him. And so he's definitely my motivator.
Yeah. There's a reason why he's called Lord. Huh?
Yeah.
So, anyone else? Last chance. Thank you for putting that in the book title in the chat, and I will make sure everybody gets that out as well.
So I wanted to say one quick thing before we close out. I just want to say, so I always apologize when I'm telling my story. Like I should be, sorry that I was raw and all that. But I think that it really helps me work with families being that raw and just being that truthful. It's like we were saying about Donna, you can literally hear it just pouring from her heart. Well, I try not to edit myself or try not to change myself, even if I might not be the most eloquent speaker, because that's what really touches families. And I think that's why peer recovery coaches work so well with them, because we just really have this raw heart for it and really feel it because we felt it before. And so I guess that's what I wanted to say, but thank you guys for letting me speak.
Yeah, well, you do not need to apologize because your story has power. Right? And so claiming your power every time you tell it, and there's nothing to be sorry for that, right? Because it highlights just your growth and it empowers others. So it's part of your legacy. So yeah, as a leader, as an up and coming leader, and as a new leader, don't be sorry for that. Just tell it.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
I would like to share.
Okay.
I would like to thank them because what I heard was all people can heal. And, I have a son that everybody has just said he's not, it's not possible, and to think that he could still heal is giving me hope today. And I appreciate that. Thank you,
Emily.
Thank you so much for
and
your.
you know what, Emily, that is the good news, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is the good news right there.
Absolutely.
It is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing as well. All right, we are done with our first chat, and again, thank you, ladies. for sharing your stories and breathing leadership into us. If you want to come back on video as participants and do the hand wave and just encourage them to keep going, we really do appreciate your time and your attention and your preparation for everything, and just wish you Godspeed, right? And know that as you step through life and follow his footsteps, he's not going to lead you somewhere bad. He's only going to lead you toward the good.
Absolutely.
So thank you for continuing to heal and love and pour your lives into other people as well. So, all right. Thanks for
Thank you for the
participating,
opportunity.
everyone.
Thank you guys. Thank everyone so
you.
much.
Yep. Thanks for participating.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
And if you need anything from the United West Ohio Conference of the United Methodist Church, you probably have some big fans today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This meant a lot to us. Again, I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you know, I was reading through your history, that it was that your Ohio Guidestone was started by a Methodist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We faith it.
Mhm.
Yes,
So
we were.
like, woo, look at us. So anyway,
Very
thanks,
good.
ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care, everyone. Be
Blessed.
safe.
All right, you too.